here crushing it earlier. They all know where they're going. They all are thinking the same. They're all following the same click track. They're all tracking along. They have a shared purpose. But in that last song, if Jordan just started like dropping a rap verse, you'd be like, what's he doing? You know, like, or like Wade started like wailing on a bass drum, like, you'd just be like, what's going on right now? And everyone else in the band would be like, what's happening? Because they wouldn't be on the same page. They wouldn't be like-minded. They wouldn't be same-minded. And so that's what this kind of word phroneo means. We're moving in the same direction. And so what Paul's calling for, this big idea, is unity. He wants unity and everyone moving in the same direction at the church in Philippi, in their relationships, in their friendships, and especially as a church gathering, as a church body. And so that's kind of one of the bigger, more pervasive themes of Philippians. And Paul's going to use the word again and again, because if we go back to the verse, Paul actually uses it twice, back to back. He says same mind, and then that one mind, same word there, same verb, phroneo. Everyone say phroneo. And so that's where Paul wants to emphasize this. Anytime in your Bible you see repetition of thought, repetition of word, it's because they're trying to emphasize something. I want you guys to think the same and be unified and have this unity. And so that's what Paul's going to write again and again in Philippians. It's going to be what I would argue is one of the overarching themes of the book. Because, quite frankly, there's some tension in the church at Philippi. We find out later in the book that some people are beefing and that there's some division and there's some hierarchy in the church. And so Paul's wanting to kind of sniff that out. He's wanting to stamp that out. And so he's calling for like-mindedness and unity. And so that's kind of part of our inspiration for the series. And something we want you guys to take away from the series. And actually, if we throw up the artwork for the series, that kind of factored into the artwork. You see, a couple of years ago, I found these videos of people mixing paint together, and it's kind of in slow motion, and they put oil in with the paint. We actually have the video if you want to hit it, Ethan. And I found it to be like really beautiful. It's kind of dizzying and mesmerizing and compelling to watch. And I was like, man, that's crazy looking. And it looks really chaotic, you know? And I love watching and just keep it going. And I think this, and we kind of captured this for the graphic for the series, I think this is a good picture of the church. You know, Paul wants everyone to be like-minded and same-minded, but he asks that, realizing that the church is a hodgepodge of people. It's a melting pot of people. And so even out here, there's people from different ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds. You guys all go to different schools. You guys have different interests. You're involved in different sports, different clubs. And so you're all from different places throughout the country. And so we all come together, and it's kind of this random amalgam of people, and there's all these like random things coming together, and it's kind of chaotic, and someone might be like, oh, that's ugly, it doesn't have straight lines and whatever. But I think there's something kind of beautiful about that. There's something beautiful about a church body, and that's what Paul wants. He wants this unified, same, like-minded, unified body. And so that's what Paul's calling for. We can go back to our graphic, and that's what we're wanting in this series. And so in terms of establishing relationship, Paul's calling them to unity, to like-mindedness. That's the relationship he's asking them for. And that's what he wants for them, and that's what we want for you guys. But then Paul's going to transition here, and he's going to talk about the problem. Because there's going to be some problems. Anytime you're trying to get unity, anytime you're trying to get this beautiful mess together, there's going to be some friction, and there's going to be some disagreements. And so here's what Paul is going to identify as the problem. He takes a quick turn in verse 3, and he gives them a command. And he says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit. Now I'm going to break this word down for you guys. The word selfish ambition here, none of us probably use that on a daily basis. Selfish ambition. But hey, bro, quit doing stuff out of selfish ambition. Why you got to be like that? Like, no one's going to talk like that. No one uses that word. And the word actually, epitheia in Greek, means rivalry. So I would go with this word. Paul's saying do nothing out of rivalry. Now we hear that and we'll be like, okay, I don't really like, what's he talking about? Well, in Roman society, we've talked about this for the last couple weeks. In Roman society, the whole society was about honor and fame. Everything you did was to achieve more honor, more fame, more notoriety. People would respect you more, and you'd have a better name. And so apparently they were British. I don't know why I did that voice. Anyway. So in Rome, everything, honor was everything. And in fact, historians call the Roman culture an honor race. Everyone, it was like a race to the top. It was like a mountain, and everyone was trying to get to the top, and you'd push people, and you'd bite and claw and scratch your way to the top. So you would be the most popular, the most famous, the most honorable, and the most glorified. They would use that word, glorified, in society. And in Roman culture, in Roman friendship, people would make friends strategically to build their brand, if you will, to make themselves more well-known. So it could be like, hey, we have shared interests, and I like you, and you're cool, but you're not important enough. I need to find someone. You're an important politician. I'm going to be friends with you instead. Or be like, you're cool. We get along, but you're not rich enough. I'm going to be friends with you because you're rich. And so that's kind of how they operated in Rome, and everything was a contest. Well, that's obviously the church of Philippi, who's steeped in Roman culture, they're going to be fighting the same cultural battles. They're going to be struggling with that. They're going to be like, well, culture tells us that we should be like fight and vie for power and notoriety and reputability. Paul's saying, no, don't give in to that. Now, in case you hear that and you're like, well, okay, well, that's what they did in Roman culture. Whoopie-boo, who cares? Well, this is alive and well today. In schools especially, there's always rivalry for popularity. People are always trying to kind of strategically choose their friends. How can I work up the social ladder? What kind of maneuvers can I make so people know me more? Or like I can build my brand or I get more followers on Insta. This rivalry is alive and well today. And guess what? Usually I try to encourage you guys. This may be discouraging, but you guys will be prepared for this. When you get out into the working world, it's all rivalry. And people are vying for the better position at work. They're vying for the promotion. They're vying for that position. And so rivalry is alive and well today. And what Paul is saying is as a church, and even just as a Jesus follower, don't be obsessed with and don't be consumed with that. You're not going to have unity in your friendships, your relationships, and especially the church, if all you're doing is giving into this problem of rivalry. And I would say even on an interpersonal level, we all tend towards rivalry. Think about it this way. If you're in a fight with someone, say it's someone you're dating, say it's just even a friend. Whenever you're in a relationship with someone, you're always kind of, if you have a disagreement, you're going to kind of have a competition and a rivalry to have either like the first word or the last word, or you're going to fight to be like, no, I'm right. I said the better thing when you said the other thing, and so, I win the argument. And so that's a thing. And so Paul's saying, don't do anything from that. That's not profitable, that's not good, that's not going to help you. So do nothing out of rivalry. Then Paul goes on and uses the second word. Conceit. Again, in everyday life, you're not going to talk to one of your friends and be like, hey man, I feel like you're doing a lot of things out of conceit right now. Like no one's going to say that, okay? We don't use that language. Your conceit game is off the charts right now. You're so conceited. Like people don't use that word as much. Here's what the word actually means in Greek. It's actually the word kenodoxia, which actually literally translates to empty glory. So Paul's saying don't do anything out of empty glory. Now, this word glory is interchangeable with the word honor. And again, in Roman society, everything was about getting your own glory, getting your own honor. And whoever's left in the wake of destruction, you don't care because you're just trying to get to the top. And so Paul's warning against this. And he's actually kind of calling out and calling this whole pursuit out for what it is. He's like, you can't establish this relationship of unity because you're too busy with rivalry and you're too busy chasing this empty glory. You think it's your name and your fame and your reputation is important, but it's not really that important. And the same is true today. People, just look at social media. We'll start there and kind of work down. In social media, people obsess over how many followers they have on Insta. People actually will buy friends on Insta. Or people that make all these social maneuvers to build their brand, to build their name, into their fame. And sometimes that's totally harmless, but if it becomes all-consuming, or if it cuts down on any unity you have, or you become competitive with it, or consumes your thoughts, your mind, and emotions, to where you're not connecting with people, then it's a problem. But here's why building your brand in that way is empty glory. I'm a bit older than you guys, and I remember something called MySpace. And it's before your time. And back when I was in college, you wanted people to friend you on MySpace. And you were a really big deal if you had a lot of friends on MySpace. And in fact, a lot of music I listened to in college, like rappers would be calling it out and be like, man, I have so many people who follow me on MySpace, da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, guess what? Who's on MySpace now? No one. And guess what? Those people that were talking about, like, all my followers on MySpace, guess what? They lost all your music last week. I don't know if you guys saw the news. MySpace lost 12 years worth of music. I can understand losing a couple songs, but 12 years of music, they just seem to have misplaced it as a billion-dollar company. So what if back in the day you were obsessed with glory, the glory of having MySpace followers? Where's it going to land you today? Oh, nowhere. And so the same is going to be true in your high school, okay? I'm coming at you with that old man wisdom right now, okay? That pleated khakis pulled up to my sternum, cardigan buttoning, thick frame glasses, old man wisdom right now, okay? most of what you're experiencing in high school, most of the chase for making your name famous, achieving popularity, is not going to last. The day you graduate, no one's going to care how popular you are. I'm going to just real talk with you for like 3 seconds, okay? No one's going to care. What's going to matter is the impact you made on people and those long-lasting friendships that you have. Probably my best relationships are the ones I invested in where I would try to serve people, and we'll get to that. Or like my friends I had at church. One of them I still keep up with, even though he lives in Australia. And so that's where you want to focus your efforts. You don't want to chase this vain glory because it's just fleeting. I've never been in a job interview where they sat down and be like, well, your resume looks really good. How popular were you in high school? Never had that happen. Never, ever had that happen. It doesn't matter. And a lot of times, too, people become obsessed with titles. And I want to be the captain of this, and I want to be the best this. Or we even do a thing in school called Who's Who. Do they still do this? They still do Who's Who, right? And everyone wants the one who's like prettiest girl, or like most handsome boy, or like I wanted most likely to succeed. But what I got back-to-back years was class clown. Which, let's just be honest, is actually the euphemized label of most likely to not succeed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like if you want most likely to succeed and they give you class clown instead, it's like, well, he's really least likely to succeed. And so that's what I got. And so we obsess over these titles, and we obsess over how people view us. And even on social media, my name, my fame, my glory, my reputation. And it's just, ugh. That's going to cut back on the unity that you have with people. That's going to cut back on where God wants you. So if Paul's trying to establish this relationship of unity amongst the Philippians, if they're all out there just vying for popularity, if they're out there chasing empty glory, that's not going to happen. But Paul doesn't leave things here. He transitions, and he says this. Let's go back to the verse. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility. So he's giving this like stark contrast. But rather, instead of that, he says, but in humility, count others more significant than yourself. And so Paul uses this word humility here. Now, I could define humility for you, but I would rather, and I think it's more profitable, this is what Paul does, I'd rather describe humility to you. So rather than rivalry, rather than pursuing empty glory, Paul says, no. Be about humility. And this is what it looks like. It's counting others more significant than yourself. Now, that word count in Greek actually means to rank or to prioritize. To rank or to prioritize. And this is why this is significant. We've talked about this over the last couple weeks. In Roman culture, it was all about hierarchy in the social ladder. So at the top, you had people called patrons. These were like bajillionaires, okay? The richest of the rich. And then above them, maybe you'd have like a famous army official, like a general. Then maybe you'd have like certain politicians that were wealthy and well-known. And then you'd have like government rulers. And then at the bottom of the ladder, you'd have like slaves and children, okay? That's kind of how it worked in Rome. And so what Paul's saying, this word that he's using, is he's saying, hey, no. You guys don't play that game. I want you to establish this relationship of unity. And all this rivalry, pursuing empty glory, that's not going to work. Practice humility, and what that looks like is not worrying about where you're at on the social ladder. You know what? In fact, don't only not worry about it, but actually place people above yourself. Come down to meet people on the social ladder. And again, this was true to their culture and society, and it's true today. Because if high school is still high school, there's still a social ladder. There's still a ranking system. There's still like the most popular kid, and then it's like, who's that kid? And I would say, as high schoolers, one of the most Jesus-like things you could do is, first of all, not even worry about the social ladder, but I would say move down on the ladder to interact with different people. I have friends that are like super in, and I did have friends in high school that are like super into anime. I'm not into anime. I know a lot of you are. That's cool. And I have friends that are, and I'm like, I'm friends with you, even though you're into anime, and I'm not. I've had friends who are like into Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not super into it. I've never done it. I don't really have an interest in it. But I liked my friend. He was cool. I also had friends that liked country music. And I don't talk to them because you got to have standards. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? You got to have some kind of standards. Yeah. I can't play that. No. So you got to, sorry. But you can't be obsessed with this ranking system. And what I would encourage you with is, as Christians, as Jesus followers, you say, you know what? Unity is more important The kingdom of heaven is more important. So I need to talk to all kinds of people, whether it's the sports people or the academically astute people or just kind of the kids that are like, I don't know, you don't really have a group. Or like, oh, this group's kind of weird. You know what? There's all kinds of interesting people, and Jesus calls us to move towards them and to love them and to bring them into the fold too. And again, you get this beautiful mess of a church. And so Paul's saying, hey, in humility, rank people as higher than yourself. Don't have a lofty view of yourself. But this not only kind of connotes to social hierarchy, but it also connotes to priorities and what you pay attention to. And so we could hear Paul saying, prioritize, rank people as above you socially, but he could also say, or we could also read it, rank people above you in terms of what you think about and pay attention to. Because Paul's going to address a lot of how people think and how they process. And so what Paul's directing people away from is thoughts about me, my fame, my glory, who I'm more popular than. And Paul's like, no, bring that back. I want you to actually think about others before you think about yourself. So this is a healthy practice. If you have anxiety about what people think about you or how you look or how many followers you have on Instagram or like, do I know the right people? It's because you're thinking about yourself a lot. What Paul's calling you to is, no. Change your brain and start thinking about other people. Put thoughts about other people above thoughts about yourself. And that's what humility looks like. Rank them above and actually think about them more. Now, if we go back to the verse, for years, for centuries, people have read this verse and thought, wait, count others or consider them more significant than myself? So am I just supposed to think like I'm a huge turd? Am I supposed to like not like myself? What's the deal with that? No. You are created in the image of God with infinite, inherent, intrinsic value. God loves you. God has adopted you as a son and daughter. You're good. You have worth. And so it's not saying think of yourself as worthless, like, oh, I'm trash. I'm a dumpster fire of a person. Like, no, that's not what Paul's calling you to, okay? Person that said it best, love this quote, my boy C.S. Lewis. He said this. Take a picture of this, write this down. I love this. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. Boom! C.S. Lewis coming through with the hammer. I love that. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. So, if you struggle with this notion of rivalry, gotta be popular, what people think about me, it's a race, and like, I need glory, I need to make my name and my fame, I gotta be popular. No, switch gears, flip the script. Humility. Rank others above yourself, think about them above yourself, and that's where your efforts should be pressed into. Now, with this whole discussion about humility, we might think, well, hold up, how do these two things connect? Because Paul's talking about unity, and then all of a sudden he's talking about humility. What's the connection there? I don't understand. Paul's all over the place. No. Here's the thing. Paul wants them to have this relationship of unity. But what's stopping them from that, what's going to stand in the way, is them chasing rivalries, them trying to establish themselves and chase glory. Humility is actually going to bond them and bring them together. And so I want you to write this down. This is a good takeaway. This is a good note thing to do. Just take a picture on your phone. Here's what I would suggest from what Paul's saying. Where there is a lack of humility, there will be a lack of unity. Where there is a lack of humility, there will be a lack of unity. And you can see this in relationships. Say it's a husband and wife. And say they're not on the same page with, I'm trying to think of a husband-wife thing, like having a kid, right? So say like the wife's like, I really want to have a kid. I want to have babies. I want to have all the babies. I want to have all the babies in the whole world. And the husband's like, a kid? You kidding me? They cost $8 billion. They're obnoxious. They smell bad. Have you smelled the kid? Have you smelled the kid lately? Pick a kid up and smell one. They smell terrible. No kid. And then the wife doesn't want to back on, but she might say like, well, I want 732 babies. And the husband's like, no, I don't want any babies. And so they're not on the same page with stuff, and neither one of them will yield, and neither one of them will be humble to themselves, and so it causes discord. Couples do this about other things, finances, what have you. And so if there's not humility, taking time to be like, you know what? Let me consider and rank what you need above what I need for a second. Let me not have this whole rivalry thing where I have to have the first word and the last word. Let's talk this through. Let's humble ourselves and have a conversation. Then there would be unity. But if people just go back and forth, there's no unity there. Well, you did this. Well, you said this. Well, I did that. Well, you did that. That is not unity. And there's no humility in that, and there's no unity in that. A more cultural example, cultural illustration, would be, I love that this went south, the early 2000s Lakers, the LA Lakers. They had a guy, probably heard of him, his name is Shaquille O'Neal, and they had this other guy, Kobe Bryant. and they were a force. And they had the greatest coach of all time coaching them, Phil Jackson. Dude has like more championship rings than he has fingers, okay? Like the dude's insane. And they were killing it in the early 2000s. They were destroying everyone. I think they had a playoff run where they went like 15-1. Like they didn't lose any games. And there was nothing stopping them except themselves. They got in their own way. And Shaq did not know how to humble himself to his teammates. And Kobe didn't know how to humble himself to his teammates. And so they started beefing. And it caused discord in the team. And then one year they had a way better team than the other team they played in the championship in the finals. And they lost, like bad. And it's because neither one of them was humble. There was no humility. And so there was no unity. And things kind of unraveled. And so that's why Paul's having this whole conversation with them. He's like, hey, if you don't have humility, you guys aren't going to have unity. I want you to have that relationship of humility. But there's all these problems, these societal pressures, this cultural expectation of achieving fame and glory and honor. And what I want you guys to do is have humility so you can stamp that out and you can be united. And then Paul's going to end by giving them an example. Okay, so we've talked about the relationship I want you to have. We've talked about the problems. I've given you the solution of humility that's going to bring about unity. Now, let me give you an illustration. Let me give you an example. Let me give you a goal to set your eyes on as you endeavor to do this. And so Paul writes in verse 5 through 8, he says this. He says, have this mind among yourselves. I'll stop right there real quick. This mind right there is the word we talked about earlier, phroneo. So everyone say phroneo. And again, when you see repetition like this, it's because Paul is trying to emphasize something. At the beginning of this chapter, he wants them to have the same mind with one another and be unified. Now he's kind of transitioning, and he's like, okay, now we got humility. You're unified. You got humility down. Okay, I want you to have the same thinking as Jesus. Okay, he says that in the verse. Have the same mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus. He wants them to not only be same-minded with one another, but same-minded with Jesus. Walking in the footsteps of Jesus. Acting like Jesus, following Jesus. Because Jesus is not just something they just believed in and thought, cool, go in heaven, cash my ticket in, I'm good. No, they followed Jesus. They believed following Jesus was a way of life. And so that's what they endeavored to do. And so Paul says, have this mind among you, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant. Being born in the likeness of men and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. And this is kind of this long section, and here's what's really cool about this. People believe that this section and the next section to follow, the next two verses to follow, are part of this thing called the Christ hymn or the Jesus hymn. And they believe that what Paul writes here, the example of perfect humility that Paul provides, is actually a song about Jesus. And they believe that this song was actually transmitted throughout the early church. So we sang So Will I earlier. We sang a song called What a Beautiful Name. We're not the only church that sings that. I would say like every church in like a 3-mile radius probably sings both of those songs. Because that's what we do in church. We take these songs and we pass them along. And so that's what Paul's doing here. He's like, you know what? I'm going to teach you guys this song. I'm going to give you something to hold on to. So not only am I giving you a person that you can set your eyes on as a perfect example of humility, but here's a way of remembering it through song, because songs help us learn. And so what Paul does and what the song gets at is the humility of Jesus. And what Jesus did is Jesus came down to our level. Jesus, fully divine, co-eternal with God, one with God the Father, came down to meet us on our level, on our turf. It's a downward move on his part. Just like the social ladder we talked about, this is a downward move. It said that he humbled himself and became like a servant. Well, again, in Roman society, the top of the ladder was rich people, politicians, famous people. The bottom of the rung was servants. And so Jesus defied expectations. He didn't come as a mighty king or a mighty warrior or a conqueror. He came as a servant. And if you look at the life, if you read through the Gospels, you look at the life of Jesus, he did serve people. He washed his disciples' feet. He hung out with people in society that nobody else was trying to hang out with. People who had leprosy, the skin disease, people who were deaf. He brought hearing to the deaf. He brought sight to the blind. He served people. And even when he would preach for like days on end, and people would get hungry, and Jesus would see them and have compassion and want to serve them food. Jesus was all about serving other people. And he took on, he not only came down to our level, just to become human, but he became like a lowly human, and that became like a servant, and he spent his life serving people. And then it goes on to say, he was obedient to, we'll go back one, he was obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Even death on a cross. Why is that different? In Roman society, a cross was considered a slave's death. So if you were down on a Roman cross, you were either like a war criminal and a rebel, or you were a slave. And actually, historians have dug up old Roman plays where one of the characters is actually a slave, and he's like, oh, I better not let him catch me. I don't want to die on a cross today. And so it was like a culturally known thing that slaves were killed on a cross. And that's exactly how Jesus died, in perfect obedience to God. And what's amazing about that is, in doing that, Jesus fulfilled this thousands years old prophecy from Isaiah 53 that says that God would come down to meet humanity. God would take on flesh and make his dwelling among them, and he would become a suffering servant. And this suffering servant, it says in Isaiah 53, would take on the sins of many. He would replace any kind of sacrificial system that's ever popped up and just say like, hey, no, I'm going to pay this price once for all. I'm going to die a slave's death, and so that by my death, other people can look back at my death, look at the cross, and be like, wow, Jesus did something I could never do. Jesus took the penalty that was due to me. I don't ever have to feel like guilty about where I stand with God because Jesus had made peace with God. He became a suffering servant, and he suffered a slave's death in our place. And so Paul's fully aware of this as he's saying, like, even death on a cross, Jesus humbled himself to the point of a servant, and he died a servant's death. He became the suffering servant all the way back from Isaiah 53, talking about continuity. And Paul's so moved by this that he does this transition here, and this is how he ends. I love this. Because all this like starts stirring Paul up, and he gets excited about it. He's like, oh my gosh, you guys don't even know what he's so inspired by the life and the sacrifice of Jesus. He pivots here, and I love this. He says, therefore, in verse 9, therefore, this is a pivot word. This is a transitional word in Greek. And basically what Paul's doing here is he starts rolling up his sleeves, right? He starts like getting geared up. He's like stretching out. He's like, all right, therefore, I'm getting excited about it. Therefore, God has highly exalted him, Jesus, and bestowed on him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. And so Paul just gets caught up in the song about Jesus, and he's like, yeah, this is the suffering part. This is where Jesus lived a life of sacrifice and took our place, dying that servant's death. But now we know that he raised to life again, that he is exalted as the name above all names. And again, to the Philippians, this was a huge deal, because in their day and age, the Roman Empire ruled the world, and what everyone did is they would bow the knee to Caesar and say, Caesar is Lord. And Paul's like, no, bump that. Caesars die all the time, and they don't come back to life. And Caesars don't take our punishment for sin. And Caesars don't live the perfect life. And Caesars don't really inspire us with how to live. And most of the Caesars are kind of turds, honestly. No, every knee will bow and every tongue confess. And the word for tongue here in Greek can mean language. Every language, every people group on earth will confess that Jesus is Lord. Jesus is Lord, not Caesar. Jesus is Lord, not military might. Jesus is Lord, not money. Jesus is Lord, not fame. And so Paul ends on this high note. And the whole trajectory of his writing and of his life is about establishing these relationships and then moving from self towards others and then upward in praise to God. And for Paul, everything ends in praise. It all ends in praise. And so what I think Paul would want to kind of communicate, I want to kind of give us this as a bottom line as we end here tonight. What I want you guys to keep in mind, what I want you to process, is Paul's desire for the Philippians. And he wants to see among them, he wants to see unity in humility as they lift up Jesus as Lord. That's the whole trajectory of chapter 2. He wants to see unity in humility as we lift up Jesus as Lord. And as a church, that's what we're called to do. As this random, beautiful mixture of people, that's what we're called to do. And it all goes back to lifting up Jesus as Lord. But here's the problem. As we kind of wrap it up here tonight, here's the problem. If you do not recognize Jesus as Lord of your life, this is going to be kind of a complicated thing. This is going to be difficult for you. Because if Jesus isn't Lord of your life, that probably means that you are Lord of your life. And maybe you're in a position where you're like, you know what? Like, I'm going to think about myself most of the time, and I'm kind of like about like what I want, and like I probably think I'm like smarter and better looking and more popular than most people, and I probably think I have all the right answers, and I probably think what I want is the most important thing, and maybe what happens is you keep coming back to yourself, and if you keep coming back to yourself, the problem is you're going to keep coming back to yourself, and you are going to be sorely disappointed with that, because you're going to find yourself discouraged. You're going to find yourself disappointed. You're going to find yourself discontent. There's going to be times in life where you realize, I don't have all the answers. Or like, I don't have it all figured out. And so that's why in humility, in unity and humility, we need to lift up Jesus as Lord. And so if you're here tonight and you're like, yeah, that's me. I don't really buy into the Christianity thing. I think I'm too smart for that. Or like, I don't really buy into this because I think I'm too cool for this. Or like, I don't really connect with these people because I think I'm like better than them. Well, here's the problem. Maybe you're on the throne of your life and you're not supposed to be there. You're in the wrong seat, bro. And so I would say in unity and humility, you need to lift up Jesus as Lord of your life. The name that is above all names. And rather than going back to yourself all the time, maybe you need to humble yourself tonight and realize, you know what? There's no humility in what I'm doing. This is just prideful. This is just arrogant. And maybe what you should do instead is you need to turn and you need to focus on other people. You need to rank and you need to prioritize people as greater than yourself. And start thinking about people more than yourself and seek to serve people and to sacrifice for people like Jesus sacrificed for us. And as you do that, and at the end of the day, you realize you're walking with Jesus. You realize that you're following in the footsteps of Jesus. You're realizing that you're like-minded with Jesus. And that, again, will lift your eyes to Jesus as Lord. And you say, Lord, I'm following you with my whole life. So, as we end tonight, may we, as a collective, as a church, as this random mix of people, may we not pursue our own rivalry or our own ambition. And may we not get caught up in rivalries or competition, but instead may we lift up the one who has no rival, the one who has no equal. And as we end tonight, may we not worry about our name, our fame, our glory, our reputation, our brand, but rather may our whole lives be about unity and humility as we lift up Jesus as Lord. And may we proclaim that He is the name above all names. He has no rival. He has no equal. He reigns over your life, over my life. And may we, as we leave here, realize that it all ends in praise. Grace and peace to you guys.